Yay Networks.
What's up? Woo Woo Science Club.
Woo!
We out here.
Woo!
Nice.
Science!
This is the episode that, if you listen to our previous episode, Brandon talked about this one at least 4 or 5 times.
Hi, welcome. We're glad you're here. I know it's been a little while.
I believe this episode we're talking about emotional maturity.
Emotional maturity.
And he's got this really cool handout full of, looks like some biochemistry, organic chemistry,
Big Daddy Garrett's going to put it up on the screen. I told him where he can find it.
So we're talking about emotional maturity, but we're bringing some science into it. Probably talking about the nervous system. What else?
I mean, what else would we ever even talk about ever? What even is things?
Bugs.
What did she say on the last one? I forgot. Bone broth is made of bones. It was so good. It was so good.
Silly stuff.
I mean, if we're just going to take it down to the base level, you are correct. That is the most factual statement you could actually make.
I appreciate that. Technically, I nailed it.
It's what we're here for, so that we can balance each other's brains out. When my brain is not nerding, Alex's brain can nerd for me, and vice versa.
My brain will tell you what bone broth is made of. Bones.
So to get into the topic of emotional maturity, I feel like in
nice segue.
A lot of episodes that we've talked about, we dive into how our emotions affect our body, how they affect how we're feeling, how they affect our relationships, how they affect our communication within our relationship.
Our mind-body.
Your mind-body connection, the way that you're potentially feeling. There's so much that goes into that. And
because our feelings are felt in our body, not our brains.
Well, they should be.
They are.
A lot.
How do you know you're feeling anxious?
You say that they are, but a lot of people.
My heart's racing. Yes. I'm sweaty.
So you're right.
My tummy's doing funny things.
The reason I say this is in
nervous poops.
Oh, I'm nervous. I hit it.
But she wasn't pooping.
She was nervous. No, the reason that I say this is I think a lot of times when we don't want to feel things, there's a disconnect. So you talk about feeling it in your body. I think a lot of people actually live about neck up, and they have a complete disconnect from this. Because you're just like, okay, like I did this with a patient the other day.
They're not like, why am I feeling this way? They're just like, I'm feeling this way. I don't like it. What can I take?
Well, it's think of where a majority of symptoms occur, and then it's just like, I don't want to feel those, and so we can push and suppress. And so a lot of times when people are feeling a way that they don't want to feel, they may even feel this like, when I get stressed, I get this like tightness in my throat. I feel like I can't talk. And it's like that comes from a lot of suppression and like holding things back and not expressing and feeling stuff that we need to feel, because sometimes we don't want to. It feels shitty, or we don't like the way that it feels, or we know it's going to make us cry, or it's going to make us feel this way. Like I did this with a patient the other day. It was on Saturday. It was actually one of Sarah's patients that I was seeing while she was gone. And he's been dealing with these constant chronic gut issues, and they've tried everything. They've done every test. They've done all the stuff.
Perfect nervous system patient.
All of these things that are going on. And like, it's getting to the point where he's wanting to do a surgery potentially where they put these little magnets at his.
This is new for me.
What would that be considered?
In your intestines?
No. So they put it at the sphincter that's at the top of your stomach.
Okay.
And it's to help close it so you're not getting as much.
Gastroesophageal
sphincter. There it is. See, you talk about me being a nerd. See, there it is. So it's supposed to help the magnets basically help keep it closed.
So he's having bad heartburn.
Really bad. Like his gut is just constantly on fire all the time, and he feels like terrible.
So the magnet, how does it open?
I don't know if there's like a way that I'm assuming that because it's magnets, when food is pushed through there through peristalsis, which is just basically the waves of your smooth muscle pushing things down, it would push through the magnets. But essentially they're trying to overcome the fact that there's a weakness potentially in the sphincter. A sphincter is just a muscle. I know we can laugh at this.
It's your
funny.
butthole.
Yeah, it's any holes, actually. You have a lot of sphincters. A sphincter.
You have one.
A sphincter says
at
what?
the end of your intestines, which is where your poop comes out, and you have one at the top.
I don't even think she knows where that comes from.
Which is where your esophagus meets your stomach.
A sphincter says what?
That's from I know what it is, and I can't. A sphincter says what? No. I'm gonna. It'll come to me.
She's gonna figure it out.
I'm not gonna figure it out. For sure, I'm gonna figure it out.
So I actually sat down with him and I just wanted to talk because I'm like, I think there's a psychosomatic portion to this. Lost his father, dealing with stress, had to quit his job, moved back in with his parents, not married, but wants to be, like, feels like he's sort of failing at all these things. And like,
this is really important because from a nervous system component, we know that the sphincter is controlled by parasympathetic tone, right?
Yes.
So if we're parasympathetic, meaning
your rest and digest system.
Your rest and digest nervous system. So if we're
not your stress response,
right. So if we're chronically stressed out, if we've got all these really intense traumas, this really intense pain, and our nervous system is stuck in this kind of fight or flight, then it makes sense that muscle, right? Because it's a muscle, the sphincter is a muscle. It makes sense that it wouldn't be working quite appropriately.
And it's considered smooth muscle. So we don't have direct voluntary control over it with our brain, meaning I can't tell myself to go squeezing my sphincter. And then it's like, oh, I'm not. It's just like, it's not under our control for that. But because I could tell how much it was bothering him and how he was like, I wake up with this every day. I can't stand it. Like, sleep is the only time I get a break.
Is it Jack?
Huh?
Or The Sandlot? The movie? The quote?
No.
Dang it.
No.
All right, keep going.
That was random. I was like, who's Jack?
I think I'm thinking of another quote.
You are. So I did like a whole breathing exercise with him. So like we talked about it a little bit so I could kind of like explain some of this to me, take me through the process, tell me about why you feel this way, when you feel this way. And then I was like, okay, can I do something with you? And he was like, sure. So I sat down with him. I was like, all I want you to do is close your eyes and I want you to just breathe. And I want you to focus on like really intentional breathing.
Two men doing this in the same room?
This is what I do, by the way. This is
vulnerable.
We actually talked about this the other day. I have like this whole, I haven't figured out a name yet. It's like Dudes for Dudes. I'm going to come up with something where it's like,
I told Brandon he needed.
I'm going to fucking help guys start feeling their emotions and cry in front of their kids and be vulnerable and do some shit when it comes to that because you need to. And for some reason, apparently, I'm not just supposed to help women who struggle with migraine, but I feel like I'm supposed to help men with this because I think it's very important. Yeah,
you talk to men on here a lot. So I think you should represent on your brand a little bit so they start listening to us.
And if you want to do this, I can do this with you over Zoom. I can do it from anywhere. I think this had a bigger impact because I was also able to be there presently with him and I kind of guided him through this process. But we just started focusing on breathing first. And I was like, just breathe. And then I was like, okay, now I want you to pick up the pace of your breathing. I want you to breathe faster. Now, as you start to exhale, I was trying to get him like, let's get as much vagus nerve stimulation. So I was like, I want you to like push the air out as hard as you can, which is going to cause like a little bit of a humming sensation in the throat, which is also vagus nerve stimulating. So he's like, and I'm like basically getting him to breathe. And I'm like, okay. So I like take it. And I was like, okay, now I want you to just take a deep breath in, hold it for a second. We're trying to calm it back down. And then I took his hands. I was like, okay, I want you to put your hand here. So I hadn't put one hand on his heart and I hadn't put one hand on his stomach. And I was like, I want you to keep breathing. And so he did. And I was like, keep breathing. And I was like, focus your energy where your hands are. Like, I kind of took him through a body scan. I was like, think of this energy. Like, you should feel it as like this tingly sensation inside of your body. And it's this energy in your body. And you're actually controlling it with your brain. You control where it goes. And I was like, so we're going to start in your feet. We'll move it up your body. And now it's in your knees. Now it's in your hips. And now it was like up here. And I was like, now focus that. And as soon as I said stomach, he goes, and a burp comes out immediately, just like that. And I was like, we're on it. And so then I was like, keep breathing. So then I was like, now I want you to say, I feel safe. And so he's like, I feel safe. And I was like, keep repeating it and keep breathing. He's like, I feel safe. And I was like, now say that I feel loved. And he's like, I feel loved. And I'm just like sitting there and I could feel. So then I was like, this is the part where I can't explain it, but I just get the feeling. And I was like, okay. So then I put my hand on his hand where his stomach was. And I put my other hand on his back like this. And so I'm like feeling this. And I'm like, my job and my goal and my thought process is like, if I can do anything to help focus what we're trying to do here, that's what I'm attempting to do. We're in the woo-woo portion here, Science Club. So just hang out for a second. We're very woo-woo at this moment. But as soon as I put my hand there, boom, burp again. So I was like, okay, Like I'm on to, and he kept apologizing. I was like, don't, just,
This is great.
your body is expressing whatever's going on. I'm like, there's some air, there's some gas, there's something, but I'm like, we're getting some sort of change here. And so I'm just giving him stuff that he can say. This is based on, we kind of dove into some stuff. So I was like, you need to, like, he's always sort of felt like a misfit, never fit in, wasn't nerdy enough to be a nerd, wasn't cool enough to be cool, wasn't athletic enough to be an athlete. Like, I'm just a misfit. I don't fit in anywhere. I'm completely excluded. And so I was like, listen, if you're not a believer, this is going to, like, you can just tune out for a second. But I was like, we talked about this in the last episode. You're a part of the body. Like, God considers you and the church a part of the body. You're like, we work together for everything to coordinate. Like, we're all a part of this body. No, I'm talking about like you as a part of, like, if God is the head of everything, then we're the body. We're the arms, the fingers, the legs, the organs, the bugs, all the things. We're all those things that work together, and we're all an integral and important piece within this puzzle. Like, we all play an important piece. You're not the jigsaw
You're talking about
piece.
how we talked about the body like an ecosystem.
Yes, like working together. And you were like, oh, I see my body as its own ecosystem and this thing working together.
You're
And so I was
about
like,
an ecosystem.
yeah.
Okay.
And I was like, in God's body, you're not a unique jigsaw piece that doesn't fit into this puzzle. Your piece goes right here. You play an important role in this. And so it's like giving him these things that he could say. And what's been cool is, you know, he traveled to the Mayo Clinic. He's been trying to get all these tests and all these things just to try to get answers. They didn't have any better answers than what we had. And I was like, dude, we're going to figure this out. We're going to get it on track. But he was talking about how much calmer he's felt, how much better he's felt. And he was like, I've been trying to do this a couple times a day, because that's what I told him. I was like, I want you doing this.
Yeah.
Go off on your own, breathe, get reconnected with yourself. Because he talks about too, when he feels it, he feels this like tightness in his throat. And I'm like, there's just stuff that hasn't been expressed and hasn't come out yet, and we haven't felt yet. And as part of why I want to talk about this episode with like emotional maturity is like, I think for us in this generation, like we talk about, we're breaking curses and I'm doing all this. And I'm like, I think we say it, but we don't have the practical tools and application and ways to actually do that that'll move us in the direction. I think we're at a place where it's cool to say it and we want to do it, but we need things that actually make that applicable and actually make it happen, and allow us, because I know you and I are both there, to model this for our children, to give them the perfect environment. It's not going to be perfect, but to give them a place to be able to grow and mature in that and be an example for themselves, for their friends around them, for their spouses in the future. Like,
for their future kids.
What I want is for that to be modeled, because I feel like that was something lacking for me in how come we don't have communication and talk about this stuff? Because I've always been considered my whole life overly emotional, and you get so emotional. And my dad would always say, you got to remove the emotion from it. And my brain goes, what in the fuck are you talking about? That makes no sense to me. I cannot do that. Like, what do you mean? That would mean that it doesn't have any meaning. What is the point?
I really love this topic because you bring up a couple really great points. One being, I think, totally agree with you. I feel like millennial parents, like who we are as a generation, is this generational curse breaking, right? Like,
it feels like how our tribe felt in school.
Like how we parent, right? It's very much in exactly what you said, right? What you value is actually what was a void for you when you were younger. Like whatever you feel like you were missing is generally what turns into values.
It's
for
your
us
highest
as we get
value,
older, right?
Because
something was missing, and so we're figuring out how to bring that piece into our life. And so this whole like quote unquote cycle breaking, it is, I feel like our generation's like totem.
It is.
You know, and in the point that you're talking about, we don't have the tools. We don't have the tools. Like, so many of us don't know how to adult. Like, Brandon was showing me these videos about girl dinner, and this girl made herself dinner. She was like, look like my age. I'm 33. She made herself dinner, and it was Tostitos with melted cheese on top. And I was like,
that she threw in the microwave.
Does this girl not know how to cook? She must not know how to cook. And to be fair, neither did I. That's a skill I've had to learn.
And she might not even have the energy or bandwidth to do it, because it's like, this is all I got.
And so it's like, not only are we missing like pretty practical skills, we're also missing these really important components of not just breaking the cycles to model for our kids or just model for whoever, but there's specific ways we need to incorporate our body, because in breaking these cycles, that's also trauma we're having to deal with.
Yes.
That's we probably weren't given or treated with or showed the type of respect or honor or dignity that we would have wanted when we were kids. When we look back, oh yeah, that impacted me, right? And so what you have to realize is you don't just act different. That lives in your cells.
Yes,
that
it's
lives
a part
with
of you.
And so this type of breath work, like your whole story is demonstrating how you're helping this patient release a lot of this trauma. And like we can call it woo-woo, but it's not. Like this is getting more and more research backed about how we have to incorporate the body, right? Like EMDR therapy, like certain therapies, we're yoga, right? Yoga for post-traumatic stress disorder and stuff like that, like restorative therapies that incorporate the body in order to help us move forward. It makes me think too, we can often see this. Sometimes what I see is that in order to experience all of our emotions,
Ooh.
This must be really important. In order to experience all of our emotions, right, where we should feel all of our feelings, we can pendulum swing to the other end of the spectrum where it's like, if I'm, that means I constantly need to be feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Like I need to be up or down or excited or, depressed or whatever. Whereas like the majority of the time, actually, you might just, like the majority of our days actually should be pretty balanced. Like
you might be at stasis, just level.
Yeah, like where we don't constantly need to be seeking these intense highs or intense lows. Like we should give ourselves the freedom and the permission to experience that when they arrive, because they will, and we should get to enjoy them and we should move through them because they are a part of life. And the majority of time, it's an attitude of gratitude, right? Where we're finding joy in the simplicity of our days, of waking up, of the unsexy things to keep us healthy, of making sure we're in our routines and our disciplines. We're going to work. We're enjoying the work that we're doing. And if we're not enjoying it, we're finding a way to enjoy it. Or
you're adding things in that bring that into that. Exactly. Of like, of course I would do this because of this.
Or hobbies, or we're enjoying time with our family, or whatever the case, right? Like that's probably what the majority of our days look like. Cooking, cleaning, doing dishes, right? Doing laundry.
And being aware of what those things are. And if there's something that's weird like that, like let that be a thing. Everyone hates dishes, but you love them. Then love them and do that. Be like,
yeah,
it's
great.
It's my thing for me. Or
meditate
whatever it is,
while you're doing it.
Yeah.
Listen to a podcast. Like link something you value to the mundane pieces of life. That's actually really healthy.
Yeah. Well, you're just stacking. You're like, oh, hey, I'm not a big fan of cleaning, but I'm a big fan of listening to some music. So guess what I tend to do while I clean? I'll just listen to music. It gets me in that space.
Love
I'm
that.
like, oh, this is what I'm doing. And guess what? While I have the music and I'm doing that, I'm not really focused on anything else. I'm not stressed about that. And I think that's actually a point I've never brought up that is perfect of like, it's not saying that we need to live in peaks and valleys. It's like there's actually a level there that I think exists that doesn't swing so high.
Yeah, we want to come back to the center, right? Whereas like feeling happy all the time, you have to realize that the opposite of that, you're also calling in the opposite of that, which is to feel upset and sad or angry or annoyed or frustrated. Like we can't constantly live in peaks and valleys. That's not sustainable. That's a recipe for chronic fight or flight.
But I want where the middle of where you're talking about here, what I want that to be is content and not disassociated.
100%.
We tend to take...
We don't need to numb.
Yeah. We tend to just disassociate because I don't want to feel those things. That's where we get into this problem. And then it perpetuates and creates these things. The reason that this is so applicable to me right now is my child just started kindergarten.
I saw the little hearts. Y'all, so what they did, he posted a picture of this. It was the sweetest thing.
It was Haven's idea, by the way. It was my wife's idea.
So Remy went to kindergarten on her first day, and y'all took a picture. Y'all each had little hearts drawn on your hands. So
we Sharpied a little heart on our arm, and it was
cute.
We were walking into the school, and we're standing there, and I'm holding Elle, which is my youngest, and we got Remy all ready, and she got her big old backpack on, and we're getting ready to walk her into the building, and Haven's losing her mind, of course, and this was actually one for me where I was like, I try to be base. Like, I have a house full of girls and I love it. I think my life has actually given me back, like what you're talking about, the thing that you would want. It's like, I've been given that tenfold.
You get to talk about your feelings all the time?
Well,
Yay,
I live in a touchy-feely house and I'm touchy-feely. Yeah. So I love like, they want to snuggle while we watch shows and we want to sit together and we want to hug and we want to hold hands. Like, I want that stuff. So I've been blessed to have that. But in stressful moments, I tend to be the one that's like, I can just keep a level head and keep everything cool. It's a gift that I have. But sometimes I think I miss out on feeling things. So as we were walking in the school, I was like, you're only going to get to do this once with her. And I started crying a little bit as we were walking her to her room. And I was like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I stick out like a flagpole amongst people. So, hey, let me just be an example. And you can look and be like, I think that guy with the giant head is about to cry. It's like, I probably am. But Haven drew those hearts on there because she was like, Remy, if at any point you miss us, just look down at this and you can touch it. And mom and dad have one too. And we can remember. And what was funny was Haven and I texted to Haven later in the day and I go, I think this was more for us than it was for her.
Probably.
Because you're just like, oh, I'm letting, this is, a part of me that I'm now letting out into the world more. And I'm letting be exposed to the world, which she's going to have to do. But what's interesting is like, we've constantly worked with Remy on like breathing, experiencing our emotions, getting ourselves back to center when we're feeling those things, like explaining what we feel, like, okay, why did you feel that way? And kind of trying to talk through it so that she understands. But right now she's going through a massive life change. It's changing her sleep. It's just changing a lot of stuff, which has caused her to feel a lot of different emotions. But the only way that she knows how to express it is through tears, typically, through feeling very emotional and feeling very sad and just like
developmentally appropriate.
And just like
it's normal.
That's the place that we go to. And Haven and I have been talking about this, and it's funny, I wouldn't have known about it except for you, of that wheel of like emotions. And what we want to work her through is like allowing her to understand what it is that we're actually feeling so that she can express that to us, so that then we can work through and know why we're feeling that way and what's going on. Because I have to sort of interpret, because when she gets ramped up to those, you can just get to this place where I get it. Your kid throws a tantrum in the grocery store and you're like, I just want you to stop doing this because it's embarrassing for all the people around me. Dude, if that happens, leave that fucking parent alone. They've been through enough shit, and don't judge them and let them deal with whatever it is, because that kid doesn't need to be immediately and shut that off. That'll create problems in the future. Allow the kid to be able to express, because there's a reason that they're expressing that. Let the parent get down on their level. Typically, if you'll come down to their level, talk to them calmly. Kids are so good at switching this so fast. It's insane how quickly they'll do it. And Remy will giggle and laugh like almost immediately afterwards when we've had time to just, I was getting frustrated because of this. I'm like, okay. And we talk about it. And then she's like giggles and wants to give me a hug and wants to do all this. Like, I'm very proud of her for trying to work through that. But the start of school adds it ramps that shit up to 1,000, and it happens all the time. And she gets frustrated with every.
It's new for y'all. Like she's going to kindergarten, but y'all are kindergarten parents.
Get ready to spice up your autumn routine with the magic of HelloFresh. Say goodbye to meal planning headaches and endless grocery store runs, because HelloFresh has got you covered. They'll bring all the ingredients you need right to your doorstep, making homemade deliciousness easier than ever. We get it. Fall can be a hectic season, and sometimes you just don't have the hours to spare in the kitchen. But guess what? HelloFresh has your back with their quick and easy recipes and 15-minute meals. You'll have a delicious dinner ready to enjoy faster than you can say takeout or delivery. And the best part, you've got a treasure trove of 40 weekly recipes to choose from, catering to every lifestyle. Whether you're all about family-friendly feasts or you're on the fit and wholesome train, HelloFresh has a dish that'll make your taste buds happy. And my wife and I love using HelloFresh to make our lives more simple, and it allows us to spend more time together as a family. Go to HelloFresh.com/50YCMU and use code 50YCMU for 50% off, plus 15% off the next 2 months. That's HelloFresh.com/50YCMU and use code 50YCMU for 50% off, plus 15% off the next 2 months.
So how does this fit in with the neurotransmitters? I'm really curious about how all of that goes down, because I don't want us to run out of time talking about it, because I don't know how drawn out those are.
Yes. So
I am chomping at the bit to.
No, it'll play into it, because this is in the back half. We'll fall into what we always fall into. Let's talk about our nervous system and how using some of these things, we can get a lot of this stuff under control and understand that our neurotransmitters are essentially controlling all of these emotions that we're feeling. So as much as you want to turn it into, it's like there are a lot of factors that play into things, but a lot of it is just the certain release of certain neurotransmitters inside of the body. And we have the ability to, through certain things that we do, adjust and regulate those things on just in a better way that allows us to respond to a certain situation the way that we would like to. Like, I've lost my shit on my kid and I don't like it. And because of that, it's forced us to like work on this and figure out like, where does that come from? Why did we act like that? And also allow me the ability to go and sit down with Remy and apologize to her and say, hey, I'm sorry. And explain, and for her to have that seen and modeled, because my parents may have done that, but I don't remember that a lot of times. And I would have appreciated that, because I think sometimes we look at kids and it's like, you're just a little dumbass kid. What do you know? And kids are hella smart, man. You'll get so many things where you're like, how the hell are you so damn smart? Like, it's crazy. They're way more in tune and understand better than you realize. And I think modeling that for them is a big, big piece of this, because I learned a lot. Like, Alex shares a shit ton of stuff about this on her social media and on her story, and dives into this stuff for her journey and the things that she's going through, because we have a lot of weird shit that we're told as parents, and that you should discipline certain things or let kids cry it out or go through all these. We're just told sometimes, in all honesty, some weird wacky jacky shit that doesn't actually align with what would actually make sense and is most beneficial to your child.
Right. 100%.
And it like, I'm kid you not, when it's like your kids know your buttons. They're triggers for you. So you need to be able to understand what it was that triggered you, to be able to work on that for yourself, but also be able to be that anchor for your child when they're having that moment. Typically that is a cry for some sort of attention, or like there's just something that they really feel like that they've been neglected or need in that moment. It's okay to just slow down, pause, take a second, get down on their level, be there with them, and not try to rush them out of that. You were rushed out of that. That's why you try to rush them out of that. No. Don't feel like that. Don't cry. Don't. Oh, no. Don't do that. Like, we try to do all this stuff, and it's like, sorry, it's already been, what is it? The cat's out of the bag. The can's already been opened. It's already occurred.
I learned recently. So I knew that we're born basically with 25% of our brain coded, right? We come out that way. And as mammals, we're called carrier mammals, meaning, so you have nesting mammals and carrier mammals. So a nesting mammal is like a deer, right? Like they'll birth their baby, and then they'll make a nest, and they'll leave the baby, and then they go gather food, right? And then they come back. Whereas like a carrier mammal, you think of like a monkey or a gorilla or a kangaroo, that baby's always with them, right? And so you've heard the term attachment.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about that, attachment parenting, attachment styles. Carrier mammals, which is what we are the infants, the babies, are required to be attached in very, very close proximity at all times. And as humans, fun fact, we are born with exponentially less coding in our brain, less functionality in our brain than something like a zebra, which needs to be able to run away and walk and run from predators within hours of being born.
I was
right?
about to say, exactly.
And so our evolutionary adaptation as humans is to signal, which means because as infants, we can't go get our own food, water, and shelter, right? I mean, I think you would have to be at in order to be able to do that independently, probably like 15 years old at least, to be able to secure that. And I know for me, I didn't really feel confident doing that till I was like 28 years old, right? So to be able to go like secure food, shelter, and water. And so in our evolutionary adaptation, because we can't do that until we are, in our 20 years old, the way we do that is to attach to a primary caregiver who then goes and procures water, food, and shelter for us, right? And so by the time we're 3 years old, our brain is then 75% coded. And that's the fact that I learned recently. I didn't realize that's how much growth happens because of our environment. Because of our mirror neurons, because of who our attachment figure is, who we are attached to. So how they love us, love is the most primal comfort, the most primal need for an infant, because that in turn procures them survival, food, water, shelter. And so then if we're attaching to a figure that does not know how to emotionally regulate, that is not emotionally mature, that doesn't mirror for us these really important concepts and things that we need in order to develop into the most functional human beings, all of that's coded. Almost 75% of it is coded by the time we're 3, before we can even remember. And so we say, oh, yeah, we just argued. We just had a yelling, screaming fight in front of the baby, but they won't remember, so it's fine. But what we know is that they do remember. They just can't. It's not conscious memory. But that's why, right, how we attach. We have anxious attachment. We have avoidant attachment. We have dysregulated attachment.
Mm-hmm.
We have secure attachment. Our body remembers all of these things, right? And so it gets really important. And so our kids are little mirrors for us. I don't necessarily think because they know, they don't know. They're just being babies.
Mm-hmm.
And babies can't manipulate. They don't know. They're pure, innocent, right? Walking nervous systems,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's what they are. That's why they cry, because they're in fight or flight and they don't know how else to express. They're learning all these new things. And so it's up to us to be able to co-regulate, to model for them, to show them what it's like to apologize, what it's like to have conflict resolution, what it's like to calm ourselves down. Not that we don't ever need to get angry, but what it means to repair. Repair is the most important part that a lot of us missed out on, is how to go from being really, really happy or really, really sad or really, really angry to come back to the center. I'm grateful to have done enough of this work to know, like, it wouldn't trigger me.
Yeah. Well, it's not going to put you in a puddle on the floor.
My husband's going through this stuff.
Yeah.
With all of his feelings. Like he genuinely gets triggered to the point where Mr. Angry Man, like, who are you?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't happen. It's happened less and less. He's done a lot of work, but he grew up in a household where emotions were not modeled at all. At all. Plenty of drama, just under the rug, right? Yeah. And so I'm curious what biochemistry, neurotransmitters, probably some hormones in there too. Is oxytocin in there?
Yes. Yeah. Oxytocin, dude, is...
I'm curious what you're going to talk about.
Oh, it's so fascinating.
Teach us.
It's cool. So I just want to go back to that because it's, you heard me talk about another example, my own example, and then even Alex drop another example for the men. Please share this episode with a man in your life and be like, just listen to this. Like, you need to, first of all, just have the awareness that this is happening, and then just the ability to be like, man, I got to do something about this. Like, it's on me. Like, the ability to take ownership within that first is just like, I got to figure this out. There's not a medication that I'm going to take. There's not, like, I just need a guide. I don't need a quick fix. I need a guide, because there isn't a quick fix to this. There's a journey that fixes this, and I need to go on it. And I need to go figure that out.
Yeah.
And I need to just be willing to put in the work.
We'll ever arrive,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's why I said journey, not destination.
Journey to wholeness,
Mm-hmm.
not like you're this perfect person.
Because I'm not perfect. I lost my shit probably like 2 days ago and was just like, what are you doing? Like, just trying to get my child to snap out of this phase, and just like, okay. And then have to go through this whole thing again.
After you go through this, I have a couple take-home lessons.
Okay.
That I want to touch on too.
So to get into like now a little bit more nitty gritty, maybe you want to take some notes on this. We're going to dive into like neurotransmitters and how we start to feel these emotions, and then realize the exercises that we talk about are what allow us to create changes within the system. So what was funny was I read this one thing and I was like, oh, this is really cool. But it's terrible. They dumb this shit down in such a horrible way that they were like, it's these 3 basic things. It's norepinephrine, it's serotonin, and it's dopamine. And some balance or mixture of these 3 is what creates all these things. And I was like, y'all are fucking missing endorphins and glutamate and GABA and like oxytocin. I'm like, where's all that shit phase into this? They had like literally these 3 little circles. And I was like, and it was like, dopamine, reward, happy, serotonin, punishment, sad, norepinephrine, stress, fear and anger, concentrate. Like it was just like that. And I was like, you're missing some of the pieces.
Quite a bunch of overlap
You're
there.
missing some of the pieces here. So then we got a little bit more technical, which hopefully we'll be able to put that on the screen. But when we talk about emotions, there's basically a few parts of your brain that we would lean into. So your emotional center is called your limbic system inside of your brain. And there's also a part of your brain called your amygdala. We know that these are areas that tend to be more active during higher emotional states. But what we start to realize is actually those are really only being activated due to the release of neurotransmitters. So we can actually take it a step even further and realize that through a lot of this, it's just which neurotransmitters are we causing an increased excess release of? Are we out of imbalance with? Or is the medications that we're on creating an imbalance that if we do some of this work and start to get things back to a more, homeostasis, like symbiotic relationship to work together, it's not that these things are bad. They just exist inside of your body and they have a function, and that's what they do. It's like you created something and its only job was to take this thing and set it over here. And then when you put another one, it goes, there you go. You just give it another one and it goes, there you go.
Big feedback loops, right?
It's like, yep. And it's like, and then sometimes it goes, well, I need one of these in order to do that. Here you go. And it's like, I need another one of these. Like it has to be refreshed. So it gets a little complicated and the words may sound super nerdy, but it's like when we're talking about neurotransmitters, we have a few ones, like they can get a little bit more complicated when they get broken down into different parts, but we have adrenaline, which can also be called epinephrine. This is your fight or flight neurotransmitter. It's produced in stressful or exercising situations, increases heart rate, blood flow, leading to a physical boost and heightened awareness. Then there's noradrenaline or norepinephrine. This is your concentration neurotransmitter. It affects attention and responding to actions in the brain and is involved in the fight or flight response, contracts blood vessels, and increases blood flow. Now, what I think is interesting about this is norepinephrine is a big part of like your fear and anger and fight or flight response, but it's also important for concentration. So do you understand how when we're trying to focus and concentrate on something, we have a higher increase of a neurotransmitter that could be like, can you shut the fuck up? I'm trying to focus here. It's like, what is wrong with you? And it's like, I just immediately went there because I had a heightened, it activates certain centers inside of your brain that are also going to come in with this. I think we talked about this on the neuroplasticity episode, because when we're trying to change our neuroplasticity, it takes an increase in norepinephrine because it takes more focus, but it also increases our feeling of feeling these emotions.
This is where it gets really fun too, just not a tang, just an addition. Why anxiety and excitement are the same pathways. It's the same feelings. It's just what your coding is about that body feeling determines what you think.
This
Anyway,
is also why when you do cold exposure, you're going to feel these things. You get like a 200% increase in dopamine and norepinephrine in your bloodstream.
Yeah.
You also get it in your brain specifically. So the cool thing, I was listening to something the other day. I didn't know there's actually a division, but when we do cold exposure, there's a release of norepinephrine and dopamine in your CNS and systemically through your blood, and they do different things. And so I was like, okay, that's cool to think about how that's affecting and how that's acting on your CNS and what is it doing to your body. But this is why.
Go over the rest of these. Is dopamine in there?
Yes. So dopamine is the next one. This is your pleasure neurotransmitter, feelings of pleasure, also addiction, movement, motivation. This is what tends to cause repeat behaviors. This is why you reach for your phone. This is why you check your email. This is why you do those things. I'm looking for something that'll give me another hit. I think there's a lot of people that tend to be dopamine addicts a lot of times with a lot of stuff that we do.
Right?
Yeah, it's just we're seeking that constantly. And you know what's crazy? Adrenaline. Well, so epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. Do you notice that all these structures have a base similarity?
Yeah.
So adrenaline has an extra carbon on it. Noradrenaline has one carbon.
Show the audience.
Okay. It's going to be really hard to see. I hope that because that's so bright, we're going to have to put it on the screen.
Yeah, they'll have a supplement, but that way you can at least point to it so they can follow along.
Yeah. So when you're looking at this, you're going to look at the top what is that, left? I almost said right. You're going to look at the adrenaline, noradrenaline, dopamine. When you look at these have a very, very similar chemical structure. These two have this extra oxygen here. This one doesn't. It's cut off basically or removed. This one has an extra carbon that's over here that's attached to it. So it's just like we talked about, these certain little things that get cleaved off by your body to either add or attach it in order to make it run a certain function.
Different function.
Slightly different function. Serotonin is a little bit like that, but then it has another bind that comes in. It's my biochemistry brain really loves this. So serotonin is more of our mood neurotransmitter. So contributes to well-being and happiness, helps with sleep cycle, digestive system regulation.
I like to think the difference between dopamine and serotonin. Dopamine is very quick. It's a neurotransmitter. Serotonin is also a hormone. So it can be slower acting, which is why it's more mood.
Yep.
More digestive function. It's not whereas adrenaline and dopamine are quick.
We'd have to look up the half-life of these and like what it's like how quickly does your body metabolize these, which would actually make sense. When you look at serotonin,
dopamine, you have a dopamine trough, right? Almost like you on the come down.
But look at how it's made up structurally. Like dopamine is actually these with the least amount of stuff on it, with the least amount of chemical bonds and connections here. But if you look at serotonin, like when you have a connection that's made like this, it takes a lot of things to be able to break that down. And so that actually, just in biochemically, explaining this, that would make sense of why it looks like that. Talks about serotonin is affected by exercise and light exposure. This is why getting those things is so important for our serotonin.
Yeah.
A lot of times we talked about this, and I know said we would go into it. Like that's why we know a lot of depression is a serotonin issue, but we don't work to increase serotonin. We work to affect the reuptake of serotonin that's already low. That makes no sense. No offense. I know there's some medications out there. They've helped people a lot. They've been a part of that. But if you've been on that, like we talked about this, I was listening to a podcast and
there's plenty of people where the medication hasn't worked.
Yeah.
And so this is just an option for you. What if we, instead of figuring out how to manipulate the levels you have, what if we just increase the levels?
What if we did something to increase the levels and we did it in a more natural way, which is possible? Like it's so easily done. That's the problem is like, why wouldn't we focus on this or do this? It's like, well, I get it. Doesn't necessarily make you money, and which can create problems. And whether you want to say that or not, it's like money is a factor that plays into that and into that world. But the podcast I told you I was listening to, the guy was like, I'll see people and I can tell, oh, depression, got these things. How long have you been on these medications? 15 years, 18 years. Okay, can I ask you a question? When did you expect them to start working?
Right.
That's a legitimate question that we should look at, not just like, oh, hey, you'll have to be on this for the rest of your life. Why is my body so serotonin low? Why don't I have any, and what's going on? And we talked about it in the last episode with leaky gut and our gut bacteria and the issues that we have there. But it's so easily fixed. That's the problem. GABA is another one that rarely ever gets talked about, but that's our calming neurotransmitter. It's more inhibitory. So it comes in and actually attaches to these things to calm things down. So it calms the firing of your nerves in your CNS. Higher levels of this improve focus. Low levels of this cause anxiety. It also contributes to motor control and vision. So as you could see, when we have a lot more of GABA in the system, it's going to calm everything down. And when we're depleted of that, which I didn't look into this, but I should a little bit more of like where that plays in and how we get this, it can cause feelings of anxiety because we don't have the neurotransmitter in there that would allow me to be able to do this, which I'm going to bet when we're stressed, we're going to have more epinephrine and norepinephrine or adrenaline and noradrenaline. And I'm going to bet those are probably more catabolic to something like GABA because they need it. I'm going to bet they're going to cut things off of it. So GABA is going to get broken down more frequently and catabolized or basically broken down. So then it's not there in order for it to be our calm down hormone. That's just my guess based on like biochemically how that would work.
You can be prescribed GABA to help with pain.
I mean, yeah, I'm just I would have to look at the chemical makeup of these and see. The next one is acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is our learning neurotransmitter. Acetylcholine is actually one of the most common release neurotransmitters through our vagus nerve. So this is when we're doing a lot of these vagus nerve exercises and things that we're releasing. Acetylcholine is super important within this process. involved in thought, learning, and memory, activates muscle action in the body, also associated with attention and awakening. The next one is glutamate. It's our memory neurotransmitter. So it's most common it's the most common brain neurotransmitter involved in learning and memory, regulates development and creation of nerve contacts. So the connection of like crossing over of nerves and those making those connections, those nerves that we fire together and wire together. So glutamate could actually probably work for us or against us, again, depending on how we create these cycles that we're wiring, whether it's a stress cycle that we're creating. I'm going to bet there's a glutamate component.
Glutamate's a supplement you can take too.
Mm-hmm.
That helps. You can do it in, like, if you were to get an IV.
Talking about glutathione added in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that has to be a precursor. Then there's endorphins. These are like your euphoria neurotransmitters released during exercise, excitement, sex, produced well-being, and euphoria, reducing pain. These are like biologically active and like secretions in the body. And there's one, I don't think it's on this list. Like I forget what they called them, but they talk about through exercise, our muscles actually release, which is probably just endorphins. It probably falls under that. But they've like been shown to be antidepressant chemicals that are released in the bloodstream when you exercise. Like this has actually been studied and looked at. And they're like, when you exercise and move your body, which everyone always talks about, man, when I just move my body, I feel better.
Mm-hmm.
This is why. That's because this is what you're releasing. So, another thing that I saw, I looked this up, GABA, which is your calming neurotransmitter that we talked about, is increased through cold exposure. You get more GABA when you get cold. This is like, I love when I research these things, and then immediately when I look this up, I'm like, does this increase when you get cold? GABA has been shown to increase. And then I was like, of course, that makes sense.
It does make sense.
What I think is crazy and what was also left out of this is one that we've talked about before, oxytocin. So
it's a hormone.
Oxytocin is it's like social bonding, reproduction, childbirth. Oxytocin, this is how crazy this is. So when we look at, I'll just take one of these. Adrenaline is made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 carbon. Like everything's built off of carbon. It's like our structure for everything.
Right.
Adrenaline has 9 of them. Oxytocin has 43 carbons.
That's a big molecule.
Massive. 66 hydrogens. 12 nitrogens, 12 oxygens, and 2 sulfur. So when you're talking about oxytocin and you look at it, I saw some people that like it's your love hormone. I saw some people that like got it tattooed. It's crazy. It's this really cool looking structure when you look at it. This is actually where I was thinking about this whenever I was doing some research. I'm like, this is where I would push back against people saying like, I can have sex and not have feelings. Mm-hmm. This is the shit that is released when you have sex, when you bond, when you connect. Yeah. I don't think it's actually possible, nor would it actually be healthy for you mentally to be like, I'm so disassociated from that. Mm-hmm. That would actually be a problem if you're like, oh, I have this issue and because you're doing something that would cause an increased release in your connection hormone that is so important for you, and you're like, oh, but it's whatever, I don't catch feelings. I catch flights, homie. And it's like, no. That is not how your body functions. That is not what science would say. I don't need to necessarily get off on that tangent, but I'm like, this is literally released during childbirth and released during sex,
milk production, cuddling.
It's the thing that gets women to go, hell yeah, I'd do that again.
100%.
You get the most amount that you'll ever have released in your body immediately after having a baby. You hold that baby, boom. It's like all the shit gets released in your body. And you're like, oh my, you just like, I remember watching that moment on my face and I was like, holy shit, that's crazy. It was so cool to see. Another thing that's interesting about oxytocin, there is a very specific enzyme. So oxytocin, when released, is actually like ox protein 1 or something like that. I'm going to get a little neuro or biochemistry nerd here for a second. It's like when it's released in the body, it's actually released as ox protein 1 or something like that. And it requires a very specific enzyme called PAM.
PAM.
It needs PAM. It's like peroxidine something. I'd have to look it up.
PAM.
Yeah, but it's PAM. But guess what PAM needs in order to actually create oxytocin? No, she needs C, vitamin C. Oh. Vitamin C is a cofactor for the chemical process of creating oxytocin.
That makes
So
sense.
as you can imagine, I'm just thinking of like, oh, vitamin C. And I talk about recommending vitamin C IVs all the time. Vitamin C for the release and production of this, I could see how maybe we're having issues with the release of oxytocin and connection because we're so depleted of our vitamins and minerals that we don't even have the ability to connect. Why am I not
Malnourished.
connecting? Like, think about from a relationship standpoint where we have these weird relationship issues that are going on or we're not connecting. We have this. And it's like, there's so many things I think that tie into your, like, this is why when you're physically and emotionally healthy and you find someone else that is, I think it allows for such a better, healthy relationship because of the actual production of these things that are going to make you feel the shit that you're supposed to feel.
Sure. Yeah. Because you can be malnourished and you can be eating food and still be malnourished.
Yes, you can. That's possible. You mean my
Yeah.
gut's not actually taking it in, or I'm dehydrated,
Or you're just eating shit.
or you're just eating shit, or you're not taking in like, you probably haven't seen her. You haven't even heard of Girl Dinner, but there's this lady that's like, people share her stuff all over. I don't even think she has a TikTok page. Her name is Barbara O'Neill. And she's this like sweet old lady that like gets up and she presents and she like teaches all this stuff, but it's like literally healing your body naturally and how you would do that naturally. And I got sucked in the other day because she was like, I had this patient come in with severe stomach pain and he couldn't get rid of it. And it was, you know, he had tried all these things. And she was like, part of it was he was dehydrated. So you talked about in the last episode, like the water that we're taking in. There's also a fact of like, are we actually getting water in? Because water that is without minerals, actually, we have a harder time being able to actually absorb and bring that in. Like, you know, when we talk about we had a lot of, you know, like, oh, I had a really salty meal and then my ring wouldn't come off as easier. I'm like retaining more water. It's like, well, you probably had a lot of sodium. Like, sure, sodium can actually be an issue. We talked about this with blood pressure and like the ability of like transferring blood into your veins and arteries. And then, you know, if your kidneys or if we're not releasing certain things in order to be able to excrete or get rid of that, it can be a problem. But I looked this up because I was curious. I'm like, I know everyone always says it. 75 to 85% of your brain is water. And 99% of your CSF, the cerebrospinal fluid that sits around it, is water. Yet I work with all these people that are having migraines and pain and tension inside of their head. And I'm like, I've tried to steer away from the, like, you need to drink more water. And it's like, I actually think that that's not bad advice. I just think it's given in a bad way because it's not told to you in a way that would make sense of not. I think you're actually diluting the concentration of the minerals and vitamins inside of your body because all you're doing is drinking empty water.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. It's not, when we say water, like your saline, right? Like an IV, it's not water, right?
It's
like
salt
like
and
what
water.
you're made of water, but like there's minerals in it. And so when we're hydrating, that's why like sometimes it's not just water you should be drinking. You should be drinking coconut water or eating veggies or fruit. You know, there's water in a lot of stuff.
What is
that
that? We
has
got to turn it
different-
into a solution. And that the chemical thing, it's like it starts as a whatever, and then you add a solvent, and then it turns into a solution. I don't know. Sorry, nerd tang.
Yeah, but hydration goes more than just drink water. I mean, quality of water does matter. You want it to have good stuff in it, and naturally occurring, like spring water has minerals. It has naturally occurring minerals: potassium, magnesium, sodium chloride. Like you know,
Selenium, all these things, manganese. Like there's all
versus,
these ones that you've never heard of. Like
Yeah.
you hear magnesium all the time. You hear sodium all the time.
Yeah.
You hear potassium. I'm like, there are so many minerals that you don't even realize that your body needs.
and all those minerals get depleted in stress, right? So
There's also, you should
so
look him up
there
on
you go.
TikTok. There's like a water sommelier. He's like a water expert, and he will tell you based on what it comes from, what's in it, why it tastes a certain way,
Cool.
what water tastes the best, what water has certain things in it. He like popped up on my page randomly, obviously, as you're doing water research.
I am a happily confessed water snob.
Oh, yeah.
I am.
We have a Berkey in our house. We pretty much don't drink anything that doesn't
Yeah.
come out of that.
So do I.
We just to filter. Yeah, it's like it happens sometimes. I'm like, I gotta get something is better than nothing. I'm
Yeah.
not saying like, oh, refuse water when you feel like you're dehydrated. There's signs that you can look for when you're feeling dehydration. So like pain and pressure inside of the head and the eyes, feeling like you can't like flex your head or move it forward, you could be water deficient. Like your CSF you're so water deficient that's not even in your CSF, and it's putting more pressure and tension on your spine and your spinal cord. Like
That's intense.
there could be postural things that are creating that, but that can be a sign. My moment that I got checked was this Barbara O'Neill lady was like, increased salivation is actually a sign of dehydration.
Your body.
So you'd actually salivate more. And I was like, wait, you would think like, oh, I'm salivating more because I'm so hydrated. Nope, it's the opposite. And I was like,
no, because like your body's hungry. You know, like you need,
it wants water.
You need stuff. Yeah, you need something.
So if you were going to, like, we'll close all this out. And I think this, again, could hopefully be another part 2 episode where we could probably get into some more practical application of like, I know we sort of dove into like our emotions and how we feel those things. And like, if we need to bridge it more, we could do that. But if we're going to talk about on a simple basic level of like making sure that we're getting the right water and the right minerals, the 2 ones that you can recommend, you can do the pink Himalayan sea salt. It has one of the highest concentration of minerals in it. It's like got 70 something in it. But the one that you want to go to, I talked about it a little bit on the last episode, is Celtic salt. So Celtic salt, the reason that that's so popular is like the process of how they get it is much cleaner. Like it's processed by hand, I guess. I'm not sure how they do it or what they do. The type of salt that it is, the way to know that you actually got real Celtic sea salt is it should be a little bit moist or wet. It should have a little bit of a gray color. So it has 3 different types of magnesium in it. This Barbara O'Neill lady, I liked her. She taught me some stuff. She was like, it has 3 different types of magnesium in it, and they like water. So they tend to suck more water into the salt itself. So it'll be a little bit more sticky. It'll have a little bit more water concentration to it, and it'll have a little bit of a different color.
Yeah.
Because my thought process was like, oh, I looked up Celtic salt. I'm like, this is one of those fads that takes over, and then everyone just changes whatever their salt name was, and they just write it on the package. So in order to make sure that you know that you're getting one that's quality, that's a good way to look at it. And then just literally a couple pinches of that in your water.
Pink Himalayan pink salt. I would go with the brand Redmond's.
Yes.
It's from Utah.
I like Redmond's.
And it is also naturally occurring salt mines in Utah.
And you can also drink Element. That's one, like, I've got a link to that and all my social stuff. I'm not sponsored by them yet. Come on, Element, get on that. Come on now. But it's LMNT, drink LMNT. So it doesn't have any vowels in it. You know, we're in the day and age where it's cool to not have vowels in your branding. So the letter L, the letter M, the letter N, the letter T. You can look those up. I recommend that if you're going to do them, have a big ass thing, water bottle or something to do it. The first time I drank one was in a bottle of water, like a, whatever it is, 12, 16 ounce bottle of water. It's way too salty, way too strong, way too concentrated. You need about 2 bottles of water to kind of dilute it enough. But it's got sodium, magnesium, and potassium in it. And it's, you can get the one that's raw, so it's not flavored at all, or you can get the ones there sweetened by stevia. If you're fine with stevia, you can use those. But in my house, we're addicted to those. We literally drink those every day. Especially right now in Texas, it's so effing hot.
Yeah.
You're losing so much water through sweating and through, like, you don't realize how much water you're actually losing through sweating, through breathing. When you exercise, like, there's a lot of that that's causing you to lose all that.
Losing
you gotta
water,
make sure you put it back in.
Yes, and in stress too, right? Like that's super helpful whenever we're super stressed, whether it's been a stressful week, a super stressful day, you're traveling, you've been in the air on a plane, you're out of routine. It can be really beneficial to replenish electrolytes in this way too.
Yes. So to close this in, because I know it's like, wait, how does this, we were talking about emotional maturity, which I think is just through your own emotional regulation for yourself in your household. Some of that's going to start by doing the work, and then it's going to start by setting boundaries, which we're also not typically very good at. We let people sort of walk all over us, or we give people certain ground that we shouldn't. And it's not that you have to be like, don't fucking talk to me like that. It's like, hey, I just don't choose for you to be able to treat me this way, because for me, that's a trigger. And it's okay to understand and figure out what your triggers are, whether it's somebody saying a certain thing to you, and whatever it is that occurs, you need to be aware enough to go, ooh, that triggered me. Why did that trigger me and cause me to throw up my armor again and get defensive and feel like we have to fight, and then start to work through that. But working through that to then have a better balance of these neurotransmitters that we're talking about is cold exposure, getting outside in the sun, like getting outside in the sun and within 30 minutes of waking up. With Remy now, we've started doing this every day. We go outside barefoot in the morning before she goes to school with all the girls, and we let them run around outside for 10 minutes and we just stand there. Don't look at the sun with your eyes open. Please don't cause damage to your eyes. But just like with your eyes closed, getting sun on your face, that's going to help set your circadian rhythms. Your body's going to go, oh, sun exposure, boom. This many hours later, I'm going to start releasing certain hormones in order to put you to sleep. Like, we need to be able to do that. That's a part of that process. You can do that super easy. Breathing exercises, cold exposure. There's so many different breathing exercises. You can look them up. Like, please start doing breathing exercises. Your breath is so impactful on the way that you're feeling. Start hyperoxygenating your body in the morning. One of the things that I've started recommending, if doing 10 breaths is too much, then start with 10 and the next day do 11. But try to do, hopefully, I usually say morning, lunch, and dinner, basically like morning, middle of the day, and at night. You want to do 30 breaths. So try to accumulate 30 breaths. And then at the end of the 30th, you want to try to hold your breath for about 15 to 30 seconds, or as long as you possibly can, and then go back into another set of that. If you feel like you're literally getting lightheaded off of that, that's how depleted we are of oxygen. And we need to start adding that into something that we're doing. I posted that shit on TikTok the other day and somebody was like, I passed out at 5. I said, cool, then do 6 tomorrow. Like, I feel like we do stuff and we're like, that shit didn't work for me. It's stupid. Bye. Just want to leave a comment. Like, I feel like that's what people do now. And I'm like, okay. Like, people do that to all my stuff all the time now because I'm like, hey, do cold exposure. I can't. I have Raynaud's. Should do any breathing exercises? If you had any upper cervical care, if we looked at the vitamins and minerals that we're taking in, like, it doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to be little things that we start implementing slowly over time to make these changes that we want, so that it can have an impact on our health, on our life, on our family, and we can finally create the changes that we need to and not feel like we have to live our life in chronic stress all the time.
Boom.
Okay, bye.
Make sure you share this, like it, follow us, subscribe, do all the things, as we like to say. Brandon's showing his shirt, Migraine Sucks. Migrainesucks.com. Migrainesucks.com. Go visit that if you would like. You can also visit youcrackmeuppodcast.com and fill out our contact form if you want to dive deeper, have a question, want us to cover a topic. Feel free to do that too. Until next time. See ya.
We love you. Bye.